Alright, the spikes are back, and now it's time to talk about the Rocky movies. Okay, so I'll confess, I don't know too much about Sylvester Stallone. I do know that he played Rocky, played Rambo, is in both Expendables movies, and is in the movie Cliffhanger, and that's about it, to tell you the truth. But I was told by several people that I was more likely to like these movies than the Rambo movies, so I bought the Undisputed collection, pardon me, to get the best ride possible with these movies, and I'm really glad that I did that, because it really was an awesome ride despite the bumps. More on that later. So, first off, the first movie. There isn't so much I can say because, well, we all know basically what this movie is about and how most people react, but I did like it because I was pretty impressed how they managed to combine so many story arcs for Rocky in the movie, because even though they don't give the most complex story arcs, it is pretty interesting what he does, because first off, it's him deciding to take the opportunity to do something pretty big, work over his manager so he can have his manager believes that he can fight, get the heart to really fight people that are above just stupid bums, win over the sister of one of his best friends, and deal with the fact that he is at first basically nobody, but is reasonably satisfied with what is happening in his life, and just, I'm pretty impressed. And what's really impressive is that Stallone is able to give his character a fairly dumb kind of speech, but the remarkable thing is that Rocky is actually pretty insightful, just isn't the quickest to respond and doesn't speak super complex, at least in this movie. And I'm pretty impressed, and it also proves that you can make an entire movie and not really have an antagonist, because this is the only movie that doesn't really have one. So, it was a good movie, 5 out of 5. Now, moving on to Rocky 2. Now, I did like this movie, but it has one big weakness in the fact that it's basically the same as the first movie, just one step farther in every single story arc. Apollo, Adrian, Paulie, Rocky's injuries, and Rocky's manager, Mickey. But I was actually really impressed of, again, how they were able to develop each story arc and give Rocky an even tougher message that he has to deal with, because in the first movie, it's just deciding to actually fight and get the heart he needs to fight. But in this movie, it's realizing that he really has one big purpose, and that's fighting. But at the same time, he has to keep the other people in his life happy, and that's a tough message. But at the same time, he can be extremely proud because Adrian in this movie, man, has that woman got some will on her. Great job, Rocky. So, still a pretty good movie, although I think I'll rate it 4.8 out of 5. I don't know why I'm not rating it 5 out of 5 like the first one, just... I feel like that's what it should be. Then on to Rocky 3. Now, I gotta be honest, I was wondering how they could really put in a new fighter that isn't Apollo and make a movie that a lot of people consider to be just as good as the other two. And what did they produce? A movie that I feel was even better than the other two, to tell you the truth, because out of the first three, I think this one was actually my favorite, because it's one step farther with every story arc, like I said, but it's also getting the killer instinct in Rocky, because, okay, you can do something that you really like to do, but if you don't have your heart fully invested in it, and really take pleasure from it, that's part of what this movie is after, then there's not that much to it. And I agree with that, because, well, let's look at two of my hobbies, for example. I'm a runner, and then I also make videos like these. If I'm not fully satisfied with what is happening when I run, I'm not going to feel good about it, and then I'll get lazy and not want to run. But if I get pleasure and really put myself into it, I can have one heck of a time when I run, even though it only lasts 20 to 30 minutes. And then making these videos. If I don't feel satisfied with the final product, then I'm not going to be turning out videos as much. That's why there's been a huge gap, because life just has put me in an emotional area to, well, I'm just not comfortable making videos or satisfied with the final products. But in this video, I feel like I'm in the zone. Sure, I might have started out rocky at first, but I get more into it as time goes along, and I hope to make many more videos shortly, because the main goal of this channel is to get 2 videos up a week, and possibly a third if I feel generous. And if Rocky doesn't have his heart into fighting, then what's the point? And Mickey is right, I think, that he lost his edge, because when he was fighting Apollo, it was all about taking everything he can and then fighting back. But after he defeated Apollo, it was, let's put on a good show for everybody else, and let's just throw a couple of good punches and let's end it. Gone soft. So, again, a very good movie. I think critique-wise, I'll have to say 4.8, but personally, I think this is 5 out of 5 again. I really love this one, and I also liked how Apollo was able to put in a different training style, because Mickey, it was more of just, let's put you in the typical gym and put you through, like, intense workouts. Apollo realized that having to change environments would help also. So they go to LA, which is a much, shall we say, grittier environment, and also work many muscles that Rocky has never done before. Pretty good. Moving on to Rocky 4. Okay, now, most people seem to think that this is the best of the 4. I do not want to be offensive, but I personally think that this is the worst of the first 4. It's still a good movie, but it's the worst, if you ask me. Now, why do I feel that way? Okay, so, first of all, the message that Rocky is trying to deal with in this movie is purely just revenge, and that no man can not be knocked down. Because although Rocky does talk with Adrian, does talk to Paulie, and does talk to Apollo early on, it's all about Apollo getting killed, and then Rocky trying to beat Draco. That's it. He doesn't really improve on his relations with anybody. He knows that if he just trains himself pretty well, he's going to be able to take out this fighter, and he doesn't learn anything along the way. He does try and throw in a pretty interesting speech to his wife, and that a couple of people don't have choices, and that he's in a different situation than those other people, but it just didn't do it for me. Now, even though this is very close to what the others were, as I said, it's really just a revenge movie, and if I had to nominate one movie in the entire franchise that was made really for money, I'd nominate this one. And yes, that's including 5, because 5 attempted to do stuff, but it failed miserably. Here, it didn't attempt to do as much, but it succeeded in all of it, so that's why I think this one is better. But despite that, did I enjoy this movie? Heck yeah! Because you look at Dolph as Draco, completely emotionless, doing all these high-tech training gears. You feel like nobody can take him down, and then you've got Rocky running in that very harsh environment, testing himself to beat all the odds, and that was just really an intense fight. And I've actually done some looking up, and apparently a lot of that fighting wasn't so much scripted. It really was Dolph going after Stallone, both when he was fighting Rocky and fighting Apollo. Once I learned that, I go, oh man, no wonder they look so much more beat up. And I can also get why Dolph was chosen as the Punisher, because after that emotionless performance, yeah, I like him even better in the Punisher now. So I think I'll rate this one 4 critique-wise and probably 4 personally, but I don't hate this movie at all, just it's the first one out of the franchise that has flaws, okay? I like it, but it has flaws. Moving on to Rocky 5. Now, I'm gonna go with the crowd here and say yes, this is the worst Rocky movie, and that is a big drop from all of the others. Now, it attempted to do some good stuff because giving more time to Stallone's son, that's something that hasn't been done in the other movies, albeit his son wasn't at an age where that was a good idea. And then having to deal with going back to a Grulio neighborhood. Sure, I didn't like them doing that, but what they did was fairly nice, and once again, it's making do with what they got and trying to be happy. But then comes something that really hurts you to the core. The fact that Stallone is focusing more on fighting than on his own son. That's hard. And then he does basically the same message he did to Little Marie back in the first movie. Why are you following him back with that crowd? Despite the fact that he himself started to smoke because he was getting depressed. And then the interactions he did with Tommy, the big shot who can do it but doesn't have the right emotional levels to deal with everything. So this is all stuff that's good for the movie, but once you get farther along in the movie, it doesn't totally work that well because they do try and put some interjections in Polly going back to the meat factory, Stallone going to a, well, let's face it, a musky, sweaty, peeling gym, and then Adrian going back to the pet shop, but there is never any full discussion that fully resolves the issue of Adrian going back into the work business. So that was kind of annoying. Moving from fighting in an arena to a street fight, that wasn't really that great of a transition, and then you've got those people like, crowding all around Rocky and Tommy guns in that fight. Aren't they worried about getting hit? Now, I know why they did do the move, because for most of the movie, Stallone was actually planning to kill Rocky, but then in the end he chose not to. Well, the problem is all he did was change the ending, because if he was going to kill Rocky, I think that we would all still hate this film. Heck, we'd hate it even more, but then it would at least feel a bit more like a complete project rather than a project that was almost completed and then changed at the last minute. And then also that inclusion of Duke Washington, just where did this guy come from? And also a couple of the other changes, such as, well, Rocky losing all of his money, well, it just doesn't feel natural. It just feels like it only happened because you wanted it to. And then let's not ignore the mistakes that happened in this movie, because Paulie signed that agreement to turn a power of attorney to their accountant? I cannot remember that guy's title, but then they also bring up the fact that the accountant has a slight criminal record. Well, why wouldn't you go to an accountant that has a criminal record? And then also, when did Paulie get the time to sign such an agreement? He was in Russia with Rocky the entire time. Huh? And then also, Stallone's son. Okay, he goes from, let's say, 8 years old to at least 11. What? Now, I think when it comes to how long the in-universe time period has gone from number 2 to number 5 is about that amount of time, but so there are some good things about this, but man, is it a big dropping point. the best rating I can give this movie is 3 stars, but I don't know if I'm fully comfortable giving it 3 stars. Part of me wants to give it 3, part of me wants to give it 2, because there are some good things in this movie, and I don't think it's as bad as most people say, but it does suck, let me tell you. So that's a pretty tough situation that I'm in. It sucks, but you don't think it's as bad as most people say. So let's just forget it, shall we? And then finally, Rocky Balboa. I love this movie because it did so many things that were kind of unexpected, because sure, it puts us in the modern age, but it brings in a couple of new storylines that you wouldn't expect the movie, because it sort of goes back to the roots of the first movie in a few ways, where you have to deal with a fighter learning the hard to fight, except this time it isn't Rocky, it's somebody else. And then you've also got Rocky's son struggling to deal with the fact that he's lived in his father's shadow, is doing a job that he doesn't really have his heart in, kind of like Rocky in the earlier movies. Probably getting laid off, little Marie coming back into Rocky's life, and she's done almost everything he said that she should avoid, but has managed to put herself in a situation similar to Rocky at the beginning of the first movie, and also the fact that Rocky was able to piece together a better life after getting a lot of it ruined in the fifth movie. And Stallone delivers some great inspirational speeches in here, and does pretty good at the fight scenes, and even though the heavyweight champion of the world in this one, there isn't that much character to him, but I did like his interactions with Stallone, because he's like, I do want to fight you, but this is different from other fights that I've had. And what his character has to learn, that was pretty good for the movie. And I like how once Stallone beats him, Stallone also says, you're a good fighter, you just gotta get the heart that I did back at the first one. And I do like how they did have it be as a draw, but both fighters got what they wanted, sort of. Even though they don't fully say it, Dixon got the heart that he was sort of after, because he fought a true opponent and didn't back down, and he has seen the killer instinct in Rocky's eyes, and then Rocky got the one last fight that he can be proud of. Survived the ring despite his old age, and then also has taught his son a few interesting lessons, and gave a little bit more meaning back to a young girl that he couldn't save, but as a woman, he was able to help out again. So I'm really impressed at just how much he was able to fix the franchise, and at the same time, you can also argue that this really isn't part of the franchise. It's a great movie that just fixed up the universe in its own way. That did not make sense. What I think I'm trying to get at as it works pretty great as a franchise and as its own movie. Because, like, I think even if we hadn't done this as part of the Rocky universe, it would be a pretty good movie, just you include it in the Rocky franchise, it's better than it already is. So, I'd say 4.8 critique-wise, but 5 personally. Pretty good movie. Okay, so, I don't know if that was the greatest video, but I hope that I articulated a bunch of my thoughts and side comments over to you guys pretty well, and you should be able to get that I love this franchise. And if you think that I threw in too many like uhs, or don't really have a good idea of what I'm talking about, could you please let me know in the comment section, because I did soft script this before I started doing it, but I don't know if it came over completely well, even though this is what I'll upload, okay? Thanks.